To all the geeks and nerds out there, welcome to a brand new series called Mastering Minecraft. And in this series, we're going to be taking your questions, using some science and getting you some answers. And as you can see behind me, we're going to be using my creeper farm in this episode because we are going to be taking the question, why doesn't my mob farm work? So let's get into this thing and get you some answers. This is my creeper farm that I originally designed for Java Edition 1.14, and we're currently running 1.15.1, and as you can see, this thing still works. The creepers are spawning, they're falling down, and their drops are being collected at the bottom. But this video is not about this farm per se. This video is about general mob spawning and how you can fix your farm. So irrespective of what design you're using, these rules will still apply. So we're just using this as an example to get things going. So this is the farm, and this is what I showed in my video. There'll be a link in the description if you want to see that video and learn how to build this thing. But yeah, before we get onto this thing, let's talk about this question. So I get a lot of comments about this question, so let's take a look. And by question, of course, I mean the comment section. So here are a few examples of some comments that I've received about this farm. And if you were to just look at the comment section, you would be led to believe that this farm doesn't work. Well, here is a video of me showing you it literally working. So I'm going to assume that these players have built the farm correctly. Obviously, when there's a tutorial, you need to make sure you follow it. But let's assume that it's built correctly. But what else might be affecting this farm? It could be the location. It could be the server setup. It could be other players on the server. There's a bunch of things. And we're going to be talking about that in this episode. So before we get onto that, what we need to do now is we need to run this farm and get the rates of how many drops we get per hour in its current location, because I've built this farm low down in the world. I've built it inside a perimeter, so this is ideal location. So this is the best rates you'll get from this farm design. So let's get that running and yeah, see what the rates are like. To help us in this tutorial series, I'm going to use a few mods that can help us demonstrate various aspects of the game. And the first mod we're going to talk about is Carpet Mod. There'll be links in the description as usual. So there is a feature in Carpet Mod where we can count items that go into a hopper. And what you do is you run the hopper into some wool and you can count the wool based on its color. So there is some lime wool and we are counting the drops. So if I hold down my tab screen, you can see there's a third line down that says lime, and there are the rates. So we can see how many per hour we're currently getting and how many we've collected in total. So we've currently collected, since I turned this on 3 minutes ago, we've currently got 700, nearly 800 gunpowder, and our current rate is around 15,000 per hour. But we need to leave this running for a good length of time. If you can leave it running for around 10 hours, that's the best thing to do to get to more accurate numbers. I'm just going to do it for an hour, but I'm not going to wait here for an hour because there is another feature of Carpet Mod where we can speed up the game and make it run as fast as possible. And to do that, we're going to use the tick command. So we're going to tick warp, and we're going to use this number right here, and that is an hour. So now the game runs as fast as possible, and you can see these creepers are really shooting around. So I'm going to get onto my my AFK spot, and we're going to leave this running for an hour, and you can see the time is now moving up quite quickly. Now we'll come back once an hour has elapsed and see how many drops we got in that time. Our tick warp has just finished, and you can see from the numbers there, our rates are around 13,180. I'm going to say, so that is the number that we're going to take as our baseline. And yeah, that's probably the fastest rates you'll get from this farm because it's currently in its ideal location, as I said before. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do various experiments. We're going to move this farm around. We're going to change aspects of the world and see how that affects our rates, and see if we can recreate some of the issues that some players have had in the comment section. But before we do that, we need to talk about mob spawning and explain how it works. First of all, I'm going to talk about where mobs can spawn. Now, this part isn't strictly necessary because we already have a mob farm ready to go. But for completeness, I thought I'd cover it right here. Now, in this section, I'm going to skip a few of the finer details of mob spawning. But if you're interested in that kind of thing, then check out episodes 10 and 11 of Dissecting Minecraft, which is also on my channel, where myself and Methods from SciCraft go over a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, to give you the brief overview, generally speaking, for mobs to spawn, they need a light level of 7 or below. Now, of course, for all of this stuff, there are some exceptions, but for general mobs, that's the light level. And also they need a solid top surface. So all of these blocks are spawnable. They all have a solid surface. It's all on the top of the block. So that's why this slab is here. And also it needs to be opaque, so we can't see through it, from the top like that. So there we go. So all of these blocks are spawnable. And over here we have some blocks that are non-spawnable. So these don't follow those same rules. So here we have blocks. So all of the redstone components, mobs can't spawn on those. Here we have a lower slab. Mobs can't spawn on those. Here we have some other blocks. They don't have a solid top surface. These blocks here are not opaque. They are transparent. Also, we have water. Now, for general mobs, they won't spawn in water. But, of course, we have some exceptions. We have the drowned and guardians that will. Also, we have these other blocks that mobs won't spawn on. There's an exception for bedrock. That is a solid surface, solid top surface, but mobs won't spawn on top of that. That is a special case. And some other examples here. And also at the end here, we have these two entities. Mobs will not spawn inside other entities. So that is something to consider as well. Now, the next thing is to talk about is where in the world they will spawn around a player. So if I'm over here on my AFK spot, let's talk about where the mobs will spawn in relation to a player. Imagine a sphere with a radius of 128 blocks. Well, that's quite hard to imagine, but good thing is you don't need to imagine. I can show you it. Like this. So this is using a mod called Mini HUD, and there'll be links in the description. And this is the spawning sphere around a player. So I'm on my AFK spot, and this sphere is centered on me. And as I said, this is a radius of 128 blocks. So mobs can spawn anywhere inside this sphere as long as there is a block for them to spawn on. And we'll talk about a bit more details about that in a second. But the other sphere you need to know about is that mobs will not spawn within 24 blocks of the player, and that's in a spherical shape. So 24 block radius around the player, mobs will not spawn. So that's why my AFK spot is right here. It's more than 24 blocks away from the farm, but of course the farm is inside the spawning sphere itself, and that's how we control mobs and get them to only spawn inside our farm. The next question to answer is, why is it important for our mob farms to be built as low down in the world as possible? Well, that comes down to the spawning algorithm and how this works. So let's talk about that. So the way that mobs are spawned is that the game will pick a random X and Z coordinate, and then it will look in that column of blocks all the way up until it gets to the highest block in that column. So let's say it picks this block right here, for example, and then it will look all the way up, and the highest block in this column is this glass block. In this column right here, it's this top concrete block, and in this column right here, it's actually this piece of string. This counts as the highest block, so it's any block in the game. And then what the game will do is it will pick a random block anywhere from Y1 all the way up to the highest block. So let's say, for example, it takes this block right here. It will then try to spawn a mob, and that's called a spawning attempt. Now what happens is there is a chance for a spawning attempt to fail, and that chance of failure increases the higher you go. So if you have mobs trying to spawn low down the world, they're much more likely to succeed, and as you get higher and higher in the world, they are much more likely to fail. And so it's not that mobs spawn at the bottom of the world and then work their way up. It's more that they have a higher chance of success when it comes to spawning the lower down they are. The next thing to discuss is this roof. Why is it extended around the farm? What is its purpose? Well, it serves two purposes. The first purpose is to keep it dark inside. So this is extended enough to block out the sunlight. Now I've got a night vision potion on so I can see inside, but if I didn't, it would be black inside. And of course we know that mobs need a light level of 7 or below to spawn. Now the other thing it does is it encourages pack spawning. Now when mobs spawn, they're unlikely to spawn just one at a time. You'll see them spawn in a pack. So if we look here, let's see if we can see some mobs spawning, and hopefully we'll see a pack spawn all at the same time rather than one or two. We should see a pack of them, hopefully, any second now. There we go. We just saw four creepers just spawn all together right at exactly the same time. And that is an example of pack spawning. So let's talk about that, what it is and how it works. The first thing to consider when we're talking about pack spawning is the size of the pack. Now when it comes to creepers and most other mobs, their pack size is 4, but for some mobs they have a lower pack size. Now you can check out the Minecraft wiki for details about that, but we're talking about creepers today, so we are dealing with a pack size of 4. So let's say that the game picks this block right here to start spawning, but following the rules we've already spoken about. Once it's done that, it will then try and spawn the pack around this first spot. So the way it does that, it will pick either the X or Z direction, and then it will move out up to 5 blocks. So let's take, for example, this way, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, and then it will go in the other direction up to 5 blocks again. So in this case, we're going to go 1, 2, 3 to here, and it will spawn another mob. It will then do that 2 more times. So let's go to this one and then over to this one. And so that's how you get a pack of 4 mobs all spawning together in close proximity. Now that's how those 4 mobs spawned over there when we just saw them appear. But there are some other things to consider which is relevant to the roof. Over here I have this simple setup which mimics what we have in the farm. We have this, which is our spawning platform. Over here we have the roof, which is made of bottom slabs so no mobs can spawn on the top, and it overhangs the spawning platform by a little bit. Now let's say, for example, that the game picks this column here with the green glasses to spawn a mob, and as I said before, it's going to pick a random Y coordinate all the way up to the highest block in the world, which in this case is this block here, which is part of our roof. So let's say, for example, that it picks this block right here. Now these glass blocks, imagine that these are air blocks in fact. So let's say it picks this air block right here. Now of course mobs can't spawn in air, but that doesn't stop the packs from spawning. And so then what it does is it follows the same rules we said over there. So it will pick a random direction and then it will try and spawn a mob by moving over up to 5 blocks. So let's say that by chance it picks this direction, it will move up to 5 blocks. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe to there, and it will try and spawn a mob, which of course it can because that's inside our farm and they are spawnable blocks. And then it will continue the pack spawning, and so it could in theory spawn 3 mobs. Even though the pack started spawning outside, we could actually get 3 mobs inside our farm. And so it's beneficial to have this roof on the top, because then it will increase our spawn rate inside our farm through pack spawning. So what would happen if you dug a hole in the ground just big enough for this farm to fit inside it, but you didn't have the air blocks around it and you didn't have the roof on the top? Well, we have this little mini setup here to kind of demonstrate. So imagine this is our farm in the center. You've dug this hole all the way down to bedrock. So what would happen is if one of these blocks around the outside was selected for pack spawning, what would happen is the pack spawning would actually be cancelled because there is a solid block right here at feet level. So when you're building these farms, you should always have air blocks around the outside so you can benefit from the pack spawning. So if you are building a farm where you want to enclose it to keep the light out, it's best to use blocks that are not solid. So stair blocks are a good alternative. They block the light, but they won't stop the pack from spawning. So that is one little tip. But let's give that a test. So we can mimic that. We can mimic this farm being built inside a big hole in the ground surrounded by rock if we just remove the roof. So let's do that and see how that affects the rates. I'm back at my AFK spot, and all I've done is I've removed the roof from the top, and as you can see I've reset our lime counter, so we're back to 0. And now I'm going to tick warp this farm for another hour and see how this affects the rates of our farm. Our tick warp has finished, so let's check out the rates. Now I also should have said that they also made it eternal nighttime, so we don't have the issue of light getting into the farm. It's still pitch black in there, but let's look at the rates. So look at that, 5,256. That is a massive drop. When we had the roof in place, we had 13,180. So a huge drop in rates just by removing the roof. So that's because we're not having the benefit of the pack spawning around the outside. So you might see that in your world if you build this directly inside the rock and you've got rock coming right up against this farm. That is definitely going to affect your rates. So one tip to improve things is to try and dig out air blocks all the way around. So up to 15 blocks out is what I do with the roof. So 15 in each direction around the farm. And also make sure you've got the roof in place at that level where we had it. And then you don't want to have any air blocks above it, because as I said before, the spawning algorithm will go up to the highest block in the world. And if you've got a load of blocks above it, then that will also affect your rates. So you do need quite a big hole to fit this farm in, but it's well worth it in terms of getting those rates as high as possible. Now it's time for the next test. And where are we? Well, we are up at build limit. So if I try and place a block up here, you'll see I am at build limit. So this is a test to confirm what we spoke about earlier about making sure the farm is built as low down in the world as possible. So there's no other blocks around us for mobs to spawn in. We don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff. So we're basically inside a perimeter, but we are just higher up in the world. We are in fact directly above the farm originally. So there is the farm over there. That is a backup that has the roof still intact. So let's see what this does to the spawn rate. So I've got my AFK spot, which is exactly in the same place. So this farm is exactly the same, just higher up in the world, all the way up. So let's see what this does. Let's do our tick warp for an hour and see what our rates are like. The tick warp is complete, so let's check out the rates. Look at that, 1,866 per hour. That is a huge drop from the original, which was 13,180. And don't forget, the original farm is right down there. This is exactly the same coordinates, just higher up in the world, at the most inefficient height. So this demonstrates how important it is to build your farm as low down as possible. So there we go. Now there is one other test in terms of location I want to test, and that is above an ocean. Here we are above an ocean. This is always a popular place for people to build farms. So let's see if this is any good. So this is, again, the same farm, but just in a different place. Now we can see there's a creeper up there. The creepers are spawning and falling down, but I can already tell that this thing is not working as well because there's not many, but let's do the test. So I want to do 2 tests here. I want to do one with our AFK spot right here in its normal place, but also I want to do one with the AFK spot right up there, high up in the sky. Now we'll talk about why in a minute. So let's do these tests and get some numbers, and then I'll talk about why that is important. Our first test is complete from this AFK spot right here. So let's check the numbers. 281. Wow. That is a big difference. Well, I didn't quite expect that. So we're much lower down in the world. We're down at Y63, I think I said. And that's much lower than building up at build height. So what is going on here? What is the issue with this location? Well, I think it's to do with the AFK spot. So let's try again with our AFK spot all the way up here and see if we get some different numbers. As the sun sets, the tick warp has finished. We are above the farm, and the only difference in this run is where the AFK spot is. So obviously we're here and our original one is just down there. So let's check out the numbers and see how it looks. So there we go, 5,064 I'm going to go with. So that is better, much better than before, but obviously not as good as when we had our perimeter with the 13,180. So still a drop, but better than before. So what's going on here? What is the difference between this AFK spot and the one down there? Well, it's something called the mob cap. So what is this thing called the mob cap? Well, as the name implies, it is a cap on the number of mobs that will spawn. And yeah, there are different mob caps for different categories of mobs. We're just going to be talking about the hostile mobs today. And the mob cap for hostile mobs is 70 per player. So in my single player world, as I am now, only 70 mobs will spawn at any one time. So why is that important? Well, when we're up there on that AFK spot, let's see where our spawning sphere is. So I can press this button and here is our spawning sphere. So as you can see here, inside this sphere, there are no other blocks that are spawnable at all, apart from the ones inside our farm. And that is, of course, that's what we want. We want mobs to be spawning inside our farm. Now, if we change this sphere, let's change it so it's on this AFK spot. As you can see, I've moved the spawning sphere to the lower AFK spot, and there are no islands inside this spawning sphere. There are no blocks at all apart from the blocks of the farm. That is, of course, except for the blocks that are in the ocean and below. So we need to remember now that drowns can spawn inside the ocean. So that is going to take up some of the mob cap itself, but also underneath we have caves. So if we don't do something about the caves, they will spawn mobs. So there we go. There are a whole bunch of mobs spawning down here. And if they're spawning down here, they are not spawning inside our farm. And so what can happen here is that if we have lots of mobs spawning down here in these caves, filling up the mob cap, that means that there are no spaces left for other mobs to spawn. And that is going to affect our rates. And as we've seen, that gives us a big drop in numbers. We're back over at the perimeter, but I've added this box next to the farm because I want to demonstrate what it would look like if you try to light up all the caves around your farm. So imagine we built this farm low down in the world like this, and we had the space around it for the pack spawning, as we said before, but you didn't clear out a whole perimeter like this. You left all the blocks in place, but what you did do is you went round and you lit up all the caves in this 128 block sphere, but maybe you missed a cave. So let's say this is going to kind of simulate having a cave or two that you missed and you didn't light up. What would that do to the farm rates? How would it affect things? So I've got it in, got the game in peaceful at the moment. So let's turn that back on to normal. So let's do this. Go over to here. And I've been playing it on normal. Go back and we should start seeing some mobs spawning. There we go. So there's our dock box right there, and we should be seeing some mobs spawn over here too. So I've reset our timer, so our counter, should I say, lime is down to 0. So let's tick warp this again for another hour and see what this dark room does to our farm. The hour is up and our dark room still has mobs in it. And our farm is still spawning creepers, but not as much as before. So let's look at the numbers. Let's see how we did. So there we go, 6,417 we're going to go with. So that is about half what we had before when we had the perfect perimeter. But just having this one little area that is not conditioned, so either not lit up or made not non-spawnable, that has drastically affected the rates of this farm, even though it's right down in the world. And yeah, with all the other bits and pieces we've spoken about. So this could be a cave that you've forgotten to light up, or it could be something from the surface. Yeah, so that is a big issue. So make sure you condition the area properly. That is a big deal. And also I should mention, before I ran that test, I removed the farm that was above it that we did for our sky limit test. Now that would also affect the farm. So if you've got any blocks above your farm, don't forget that is definitely going to affect your rates as well, because as we said before with the spawning, the game will try and pick any block up to the highest block, so it may start picking blocks above your farm and try and spawn mobs there, and of course there won't be anything for it to spawn on. So yeah, make sure you don't have any blocks at all above your farm. Now the next thing to talk about is servers. What happens if you play on a server with other people? How does that affect things? So of course we mentioned that a mob cap is 70 per player, but yeah, if you add some more players to the world, how does that affect things? Let me introduce you to Ace Logic. He is my alter ego, and yeah, here he is over here, and I've added the spawning sphere around Ace Logic. So this is his spawning sphere. This is where mobs can spawn, and as you can see, we're still close to the perimeter, just to give you this idea of this cross section. So here we can see all the caves and this is where mobs can potentially spawn. In fact, we've got some over there already. So mobs are spawning inside this cave, filling up the mob cap, and yeah, that is going to affect the farm. So even if I've got my farm inside a perimeter and everything is totally perfect, if there are other players on the server loading other areas and they are loading mobs, then that means those mobs are filling up the mob cap, and that means that that will affect how many mobs can spawn inside my farm. So let's do a test. So I can summon another player and we can do some experiments with multiple players on a server. I've moved away from the perimeter out into the open, but I'm all by myself. But before I summon a friend in, let me show you one more thing. So if I look at my tab screen, the second line down, that shows us the mob caps for the different categories of mobs in the game. So for today, we only need to look at the first two numbers that they are around the hostile mob cap. So the second number, the red 70, that is the mob cap. So there's one player, that's me, and it's 70 mobs. So only 70 mobs can spawn in this world. Now the first number, the 73, that is the total number of mobs in the world so far. So there's 71 now, 73. So that fluctuates a little bit. Sometimes goes over the mob cap a little bit. Not to worry about that just yet. We can talk about that in a future episode. But what we need to do now is we need to summon in a friend so we can raise our mob cap as well. So Carpet Mod has a feature where you can summon in another player. So Steve is one of those. So let's summon in Steve. Hey Steve, how you doing? So here he is. He's another player. He operates just like another player would do in the game. Now, if I look at that our tab screen again, we still have a mob cap of 70, even though there's two players, and it's supposed to be 70 per person. Well, because we're in the same chunk, it stays at 70. Now, as I move away from Steve, you should see that that number should grow and should go higher and higher the further and further away that I go. So eventually it will get to 140, which is a two-player mob cap. Now I'm going to go all the way back to the perimeter, and then we can see our mob cap in full. I'm back at the perimeter and Steve is over there in that direction, and as you can see from my tab screen, the mob cap for us now is 140 because we're far enough away from each other. So imagine this is a server with other people playing on the server, and they are around and they are in areas that aren't conditioned at all, so mobs can spawn. And as you can see from the first number, Steve is filling that mob cap. So even though I am in a perimeter with perfect conditions, my mob farm is built perfectly at the bottom of the world with our roof, with pack spawning and all this kind of stuff we've already spoken about. Steve is over there ruining the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see, I don't think we're going to get much out of this, but let's run this anyway for completeness. Let's run this farm for an hour and see how many spawns we actually get. The test is complete, so let's take a look at the numbers. There's a few creepers still spawning, and we got 611. Wow, that is a massive drop. So we're losing something like 12,500 drops from the original 13, just over 13,000. That is a huge drop, and the only difference really is that there's a player online, just one player online in an area that hasn't been conditioned, and so they are filling up the mob cap, and that is stopping mobs spawning inside our farm. Now, of course, you can imagine that if you combine some of these things together that we've tested today, so maybe some players online if you're on a server, plus if you build this farm higher up in the world, plus if you've got some other spawning spaces around your farm, or if you've got the AFK spot in slightly the wrong place. So those things can all combine to make this farm not produce much, not many items at all. And of course, when I say this farm, what I actually mean is any farm. This farm is just being used for demonstration purposes. This is just how Minecraft works, just how the mob spawning algorithm works. So any farm design will suffer from the same things as well. So we've got a few things to finish up on. So let's talk about the last few bits and pieces before we say goodbye. As we're on the subject of servers, it's important to mention that this design and all of the stuff we're talking about today is all about Java Edition, in particular 1.15 and above. So yeah, if you're on something different, if you're running Spigot or Paper, that kind of stuff, then although that's based on Java, they have some different configurations. They might have some plugins. They can change how the game operates, and so some of these things may not be the same, and that may well affect your farm as well. So that's something to consider. If you're not sure what you're running, then speak to your server admin and see if they can help you out if you do have some issues. The other thing to mention, of course, is, as I said, this is Java Edition. So if you're on Bedrock, then all of this stuff doesn't apply to you because Bedrock works totally differently with mob spawning. There's a whole bunch of different rules that I don't know about. But if you check out Silent Whisperer on YouTube, I'll stick a link to his channel in the description. He's got a bunch of videos all about Bedrock and farms and how they work. So definitely check him out. But yeah, if you're a Bedrock player, then this stuff is not really applicable to you. So my advice is, if you find the tutorials online on YouTube or whatnot, check in the description, check the title, make sure that it's for your version of the game before you build it, and just in case, because you know it may not work. And also check out the comments, see what other people are saying before you go ahead and build a farm. So there we have it, the first episode of Mastering Minecraft is out, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you found it useful. Now these episodes are going to come out as and when, they're not going to be on a schedule, so yeah, if you've got any suggestions for questions you'd like to ask for me to investigate and get you some answers, then stick them in the comments. I'm definitely looking out for those. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please hit the like button, and if you're new, then feel free to subscribe, and if you've got any comments or suggestions, then get it in that comment section. Alright my geeks, until next time, I will see you later.